the review for the final exam. So if you follow the numbers, like for example on the final exam, number one should be very similar to this number one for the review. So they're one to one. If you see number one on the final, it should be similar to the number one on the review. So you can follow this while you do the final. There's some minor differences, but they're covering the same type of question. But most of the time, it's almost the same question, which is different numbers. So I'm just explaining how this goes. I'm not gonna go too over all the questions because there's 25. PCC created this test, and well, not this one, the actual one, the final is a review, and it's multiple choice. So half of the grade would be getting the right answer, the other half would be showing the work like I have here. For example, this one is just using PEMDAS, order of operations, and this is absolute value. I wrote a note here what it is for example, if that was an x in the middle, absolute value is the distance from x to 0. So it's always going to be positive wherever you get here. It's always positive, as you notice. So first you need to solve the stuff in here like you would normally. Once you get to the end, you see I got a negative, but since we have the absolute value and its distance, this is always positive. That's why that negative becomes a positive. So just solve it. Like you guys know, I have the steps here, and that gave me 10. Okay, for this one, you're gonna get fractions. I think on the exam, I think the exam one is even easier than this one. So you might not have that many fractions, but for example, this part, everything's addition, this is multiplication, so you will multiply this, like here, 8 times 3 over 2, and that gives me 24 over 2, and that simplifies to 12 over here. Now these fractions over here, when you add them, you can do the butterfly where you multiply the numbers, the diagonals. 2 times 6, 12. 3 times 5, 15, and then that's a plus, so you put a plus here. Divided by 3 times 6, which is 18. So that combines these two fractions. So you add these numbers, it gives me 27 over 18, and then that one's 12. So that one cannot be simplified where we get a nice number. It's still a fraction, so that 12 you need to put a 1 at the bottom, because that 12, remember, don't forget that 12. So now you're gonna have to do the butterfly again. So again, diagonally multiply these numbers. 27 times 1 would be that, 18 times 12 would be that, and then divided by 18, I get this. When I simplify, I get 27 over 2, and that's the answer. So butterfly to add fractions, remember that, or subtract them. Okay, again, another order of operations. That's a multiplication sign. So you're gonna have to add these ones the same way I did over here, butterfly, and then I end up with this. That can be further simplified. I get that. Don't forget that exponents. You need to follow the parentheses first and then do the exponents. So 2 means you're multiplying this, the whole thing, with the negative twice, like this. You still have these. We haven't covered this yet. We just carried it over. We just carry this over again here, and then that one, when you do it, it gives me 1 over 144. Why? Because 1 times 1 gives you 1. 12 times 12 gives you that. Both of them are negative, so it becomes positive. Okay, once you get here, then we're gonna solve for this. So what happens? That's a division, so we need to get rid of that division to simplify things for us. So this is when you do the keep. You keep the first fraction the same way. You change the division into multiplication, and then you flip the last fraction. So instead of 1 over 144 is now it's 144 over 1. Obviously you don't need the 1 anymore, but I just have it in there so that you guys see what happened. Now you just multiply across 7 times that, and I didn't multiply fully because I could tell that 144 can be divided by 12. That's why I kept them separate here. 12 times 1 is just 12, and this is what I mean here. You can simplify this divided by that would give me 12. 144 divided by 12 is 12, and then multiply by that 7 and give me 84. That's the answer. Okay, for scientific notation, there I saw two questions on the final. I'm gonna go over this one. So remember, that's when you're dealing with large numbers. So that's the point. It's right here. So you need to carry that decimal point this way until you reach almost, well, before you reach the last digit, you stop. So when you reach that, you don't go over that 9. You stop just before it, and then you count how many units. And I counted 11 units that way. So this is a large number. So when you're making large numbers into small numbers, that exponent for the scientific number would be positive. So you write down all significant figures all the way to the 2, and you know you don't need to include those zeros. They're not significant. So like you see 9 point, and then I have all these numbers up to 2 times 10 to how many units you move to the left, because we're dealing with large numbers, 11. On the other hand, when you have very small numbers, so that's the decimal, you need to move it all the way until you go over the first digit. So after the first digit, you stop. And that's -8 units to the right. So now you write the scientific number. So you start with 7.24 here times 10. And since this is a small number and we're moving to the right, you have the exponent becomes a negative for this one. And that's your answer. That's how you solve scientific. So 5 is the same scientific. I'm not going to go over that one. Okay. This is a percent. There's 2 of them on the exam. So this is the one that they give you a discount or on something, and this is an automobile, so they gave you a discount on the price of a car, discount, and then they give you the original price of a car, which is right here, the original price, and they want you to find the discount and the new price. That's why I have discount and new price. So for the discount, you're gonna use the original price. What percent of the original price did they take away? They have it here. They took away 5%. So that's 5%. Remember, when you're multiplying, you have to convert it into decimal form. You carry the decimal twice to the left. So 5% would be 0.05 times the original price of the car. That's how much the discount is. I wrote it down here. $1,675 discount on that car. To find the original price, so remember original, which is that given, minus the discount should give you the new price, and that's all I did. Original minus discount, and that's the new price. 31,825. Okay, for this ones, now they want you to find the original. They don't give you the original for this. They gave you the sale price, like the after what happened to this, and they gave you how much they took away from the original. That's why I have it here. Original price, which we don't know. That's why I have an X. And I just put a 1 there so that you don't forget that the 1 always accompanies the X when there's no number. And then minus the discount. What's the discount? Is that percent. They don't give you a numerical number like over here we found that as a discount. Here they gave you just the percent. So we know that the discount has to be the percent times the original price, which we don't know, but we know if put together that will give us right the number, the discount, the actual number, the actual amount of money that was taken away. But since we don't get the original price, all we can do is write it like that in algebraically with the X. So again, that's the original price minus the discount, which is 20% of the X of the original, would give us the sale price. So this is the sale price. How do we go backwards? So this is one of those questions where you're going backwards. So first you need to subtract these two numbers. So that minus that gives me, so I took out the x over here, and then I grouped these ones here. So 1 minus 0.2 give me 0.8 of that x, and then you divide by 0.8, 136 divided by 0.8 to solve for x, because that's going to give us the original price. And that gave me, when you divide this, it gave me 170. So that's the original price. The original price of the shoes were $170. They took away the 20%, and he gave us a sale price of 136. Okay, this one is just solving expressions, simplifying. So here you just distribute. That one, there's nothing to distribute. That's a 1. That's a positive, so it doesn't affect anything here. Be careful if this was a negative outside this one. Then you will need to distribute that negative. Don't forget that. I think the one on the exam might have this as a negative, so you will have to distribute a negative 1. So it would change the signs of these things. But for this example, it didn't change because that's positive and that's a 1. All you need to change is this part because that one does affect these terms inside. So I just distribute and then I copy this the same way because it doesn't get affected. And then here I just combine like terms. So I regroup them. That's why it looks different, this one from that one. I regroup the like terms. And then that's what I get at the end. Okay, for 9, it's when you have to graph the inequalities. So remember, they give you the inequality, so you're going to solve for h. Here I solve for h. On this step, I divided by a negative, so that's when you flip these signs. I even wrote the word here flip, because you divide by a negative. When you divide by a negative or multiply, you flip these things. So that gave me -8, so that would be the answer. Now you graph. H has to be greater than -8, so that's -8. I found it. It has a line at the bottom, that's why I have the bracket or the shaded dot, same thing. And then H is bigger than that, so it's got to go that way. These points away, like we said, when the variable is on this side. So it's going this way. Okay, number 10. So number 10, you have to, so they give you these equations. So now we're solving for an equation. These two are equations. They're not expressions anymore. So now, this one, they give you a bunch of fractions. On the test, there's one like this. Maybe not with that many fractions. Maybe you would get one fraction. Still, the first thing you need to think of when you're dealing with fractions, eliminate them. So find a number that would eliminate all of these, and my number was a 12. Why a 12? Because 12 can be divided by 3, it can be divided by 2, and it can be divided by 4. What does that mean? That when I input that 12 into these terms, I'm going to cancel these numbers at the bottom, the denominators. And I show you here, you distribute, right, to all the terms. That's what I get. And if you notice, 12 can be divided by 3. That's what I was saying. 12, everything can, these numbers divide 12 here in every term. And I have it here. I simplify it a little bit more. And then here, that's when I get rid of the fraction. 24 divided by 3, that's an 8. 12 divided by 2, that's a 6. 12 divided by 3, that's a 4. 12 divided by 4 is a 3. So we got rid of the fractions. Now it's a simple equation. Solve for P, and that's what I get. Alright. So again, another equation you need to distribute. I'm not going to go over this. It's the same thing. The only difference, you get a fraction at the end. So it's not the one of those nice ones. But that's just at the end. So everything's nice until you get here. You just leave it like that. Make sure it's in simplest form. Same thing as the one on top, except that there's no fractions. It's just a straightforward, right, solving for x. So here the purpose is to solve for x. Okay, number 12, it's a system. So you get to pick if you want to solve by substitution, elimination. Let's say you want a graph, make sure I see the graph and where they intersect, and give me the intersection like this in as an order pair. But if you're using substitution elimination, for this one I picked elimination, and I change the equation at the bottom by multiplying by 2. because I noticed if I multiply that by 2, I could cancel the x's here. So when I multiply that by 2, it gave me negative 4x, which is what you want. You always want the opposite sign of the one on top, or the opposite if you're doing the top one on the bottom. In this case, I was trying to get rid of that x, so I know I need a 4, and I need it to be negative. That's why that one's already a negative. All I need to do was multiply by 2. So that cancels that. 2 times 2 gave me a negative 4. 2 times 10 gave me a 20. So, and then you add like that vertically. So y negative 1 minus 4 would be negative 5. 20, 20, 40, and then you divide by 5, and then that gave me the y value of the solution. Here's when you find x, so you have to substitute y into one of these two equations. I substituted, you choose any, I picked the first one, so the y is now negative 8, so now you solve for x, and I got 3, so that would be the solution. Okay, this one, it's a new, I don't think I had the time to cover this one. I know you've seen it in Algebra 1, maybe in Algebra 2. But it's the same, it's a system of equations, but the only difference, you need to find the system. So that's why I was here, create the system of equations, find it. So if you read through the words, right, they're talking about selling tickets, and they're saying they're selling senior citizen tickets and student tickets. That's when you have to identify the first one as the X and the second one as the Y. So X represents senior citizen tickets, the Y represents student tickets. So now I know what each means, and after that you need to relate numbers and the variable that you picked. So for senior citizen ticket, that would be 4x. And then because they're talking about selling, so you know they're gonna add whatever they sell of these two different types of tickets. That's why I have an addition, because they're adding what they're making. They sold 5 student tickets here, so that's 5y. Y means student tickets. And they made a profit on that day of $102. Well, not a profit, that's how much they make. They would still have to deduct the cost of whatever they're doing. And then the second one would be 7 seniors, so 7x plus 5 students, 5y, and that day they made $126. So now I have the system. So after this, you know what to do. You either do elimination, substitution. I should have done substitution to show the difference, but I picked elimination. So I noticed that these two are 5s, right? These two, but they have the same sign. So all I needed to do is change one of the signs. So I think I picked the one at the bottom, because all I need to change the sign to cancel the y. So I multiplied by a negative, it gave me this. Change the signs of the bottom one, the one on the top stays the same. So that cancels y, it leaves me with x only. And then you add stuff going down. That's a positive, minus a 7 gives me a negative 3. That one gives me a negative 24. Divide both negatives, it gave me a positive 8. So $8 is the price of senior citizen tickets. That's why I have the $8 here, because they wanted to know the price of each ticket. To find the price of student tickets, that's when I go over here, because I didn't have space here. So you find y, which would be the student ticket price. So we know x, which is 8, and then you pick one of these two equations, like we said, substitute for x, solve for y, and I got for y, the y was 14 at the end. So I know student tickets is worth $14. So this is just an exponential expression. So this is the exponential expression. This is when you need to remember the rules of exponents. This is a power to a power, you multiply. When you're dividing, like the y here and the y here, you subtract. When you're going across, multiplying, you add. So remember those. So here what I did first, I multiply this. Power to a power, you multiply 5 times 8 would give me negative 40, because that's a negative. That one stays here. Now the negative rule of exponents, that means we don't want negatives. So I brought this up and I brought this down. And yes, there's different ways on how to solve this. I could have just skipped that step, but I have to follow what the book has. That way you understand. I could have just subtracted from here, and then at the end solve it. But I'm following the book, and they say to carry this to the top, carry that to the bottom. So change that to a positive because we carry it to the top. Change that to a negative because we carry that to the bottom. And then what happens here? Division, rule of exponents, the quotient rule of exponents. You subtract that minus that because it has the same base. 28 minus 40. That gave me negative 12 again. So we ended up with a negative again. So that means you need to bring it down because we don't want negatives. That's why I have it here, down here. What goes here? I left it blank so that it would make you think, oh, why is it blank? Well, because you need to put a 1. Because there's nothing here. If it would have been something here, you would have just left it like that. But when you end up with nothing, then that's when you include the 1. And that's how you solve these ones. So I know community college created this exam is really, really long. So for this one, there's questions almost like, I think that one's the same, almost the same. That one, I think they give you that equation and they give you options like different graphs. Well, I think they gave you the graph. I think they give you the graph and they give you a bunch of these, 4 of them, and you need to match the one that matches the graph. So this is different. So I did it like this so that you will know how to graph it. So remember how to graph this. This is slope-intercept form. So that would be the y-intercept. That would be the slope. The slope is rise over run. -3. There's a 1 at the bottom because we need to know how much is running. It's running 1. Then that's the y-intercept. The x is always 0, and then the 2 is the second number in the order pair. So how do you graph this one? You start with y-intercepts. So you found 0, +2, which is right here. 0, +2. So from that point, from this point, you're going to use that slope to find the other point so that you find your line. So what is this? This is a negative, so we know the line is going down because of the negative sign. So you go down 3 units and then you run 1. 3 units, run 1. And you find all these points. If you go the opposite way, well, you have to go up 3 and then run 1 to the opposite ways. So if you go this way, you need to do the opposite. So that's why I always start going down first, because that makes more sense. Down 3, cross 1. And that's how you find the point. So maybe on the test, look at these equations and see which one starts from that. See which one starts from whatever the graph. They need to match that y-intercept and they need to match the slope. All right. So again, this is another problem that we didn't get to cover, and it's inequality. So they're going to give you an inequality and you would solve the same way we've been solving for them, except that there's 2 variables in this case. So you're going to have to solve like you would solve an equation. You need to solve for y, always y is equal here. So imagine this is a line that's an equation, but in this case, obviously it's an inequality. What I'm trying to say, you need to solve for y. Same way you would solve for slope-intercept forms. When you try to convert it into slope-intercept, you solve for y. So I need to bring the x over here. The x over here. I should have wrote it maybe here. So usually these inequalities look like this. So these can go either way. You can have a line or not. But that's how they look. That's why I'm making it look like that. So you solve for y and end up with this. So what happens here? That's when you graph the line. So this is the line, this part. So I graph it like we did the one on top. This. And I found the line. Now why is there a dashed line here? Because there's no equal sign here. There's no line at the bottom. You need to make that a dashed line because it's not part of the solution. If there was a line here, you would make it a solid line. Maybe if it's like that, remember it would be a dash line. If it has a sign here, it would be just a solid line. So dash, and that would be solid with the line. So that one's just a dash line. So that's the line. Now this is a step where you have to figure out where I'm gonna shade, because y is less than this line or greater. So what does that say? It's less. I wrote it here. Y is less than that line. And I wrote the little graph here. If you go up, if y says bigger, that means it's over here, greater on the top. it's less, that means it's down here, at the bottom. That's why I'm shading this part at the bottom below the line, because y is less than that line, so everything. But now it's not a point, it's the whole plane. The whole plane is less than that line. That's how you do this one. Is on you come side and cover it. I might not count it. Hopefully, if you guys do it, if you guys do well enough, I'm gonna give you extra credit. I don't know. I haven't decided. So again, another line. I'm not going over them. Just ask you to find the slope using that line, the x-intercepts and the y-intercept. Everything's here. So remember that's the origin. That would be the y axis, and that would be the y-axis. So where does it touch the y-axis? Obviously here. What does it touch the x? Obviously here. How do you find the point? I mean the slope. You can either use the formula, or you can just tell me how much is running, how much is rising and running. That's why I have it here. It ran 4 and then it rise 4 and then it ran 6. So that would be the slope 4 over 6, because rise goes first, this, and then run, this. That can be simplified to 2/3. So those are the answers. And then he tells you write that equation in slope intercept. So you know that's the slope, that's the y-intercept. All you have to do is substitute that into the m, and the y-intercept on -4 into the b. Get the equation. So this one, that's where you have to create an equation. They give you the points and they give you a slope, and you need to create the slope-intercept form of that line. So remember, they give you a point and a slope. You're going to use the point-slope form, which is right here. So that's a point, that's a slope. You substitute into the formula. This is the x1, that's the y1, and that's the m. The m right here, the slope. So you substitute, that would be the y1, which is right here, that would be -3. 1 minus -3 equals the slope, 6 times x minus 2. 2 would be the x1, this one. Minus is part of the equation. Then you solve for y, you bring everything to the right, and you end up with this, and that would be the slope intercept form. That's the solution for this equation. Okay, for this one, they give you an equation, and then they're saying to find k. That's going to confuse you. Why are they using k when we have y and x? Well, they give you this ordered pair, 3 and k. So what does it mean? That's why I wrote it here. 3 and k, that would mean the 3 would represent the x. That's why I have x equals 3. And the k will represent the y of the ordered pair. So y equals k now. They just changed the letter. Instead of a y, they're using a k. That's all. Don't get all scared. So now you need to find k, because we already have x. That's what they want. They want you to find k, which is a y. So what are you going to do? Well, you're going to use that equation. You're going to substitute the 3, and then you're going to substitute the k, just so that you don't get confused, even though you could have left it as y, and then at the end maybe flip it. But I just chose to leave it as k, right, which is that yk, and then the x would be the 3. Solve for k, and you end up with that. That would be the value for k. Okay, that one. So let me go over this one. These ones are easier, and then I'll come back to that one. So they're going to give you something like that, and they're asking you to multiply it. So that 2 means you have 2 of these things. So you can either use the foil, the box, and I know there's different methods. I'm using the foil, where you multiply like that, and then you multiply that outer first, and then inner. I have everything here spread out, and then you simplify, and then you combine like terms. Usually those terms that you can combine are these in the middle, and that's what I get, and that's all they want. For that one, the volume of a rectangular prism, guys, this is length times width times height. You find what each length is. So look at these values, put them here, and then apply them into the formula, substitute them. All you're doing is multiplying, and that's the volume of this prism, 680 meters cubed. Okay, this is a type of question that we went over this week. They're going to give you a triangle, and then you need to find x, and then you need to find y outside. So remember, the measurements of a triangle, the measurements of these angles are equal to 180. The measurements of these two angles are also equal to 180 because they're straight angles. So these two are straight angles. This is the interior angles of a triangle measure 180. So you find x first. This is how x, and then you add these two, and they have to equal 180, and then solve for x, and you end up with 78. So you now have this one. We know these two add to 180, that's why I have it here. X is equal to 78, and that's the y. This is just this part. I wrote it, I like drew the diagram of this section on right here. So we need to find y. So if you add them and they equal 180, that's why I'm adding 78, which we found. So the y that we're missing, they both have to equal 180 because they're straight angles. And then you solve for y, and that's what I get. It's really simple, straightforward. Let me do the last two because they're so easy. This is also, I forgot to write proportions. Similar figures. So this is also new. Not new, you guys should know it. And I'm not counting because it's so easy that you guys should be easy how to solve. So remember, when you're dealing with proportions, you can have an equation. So and then you can choose any pattern that you want as long as you follow it. So I'm doing 9 over this. So I'm staying with this one. 9 over this should equal, because they're similar, to y over 24. You have to follow the pattern. If you started with the 9 on the other side of the equation, you need to start with the corresponding side, which is the y. You add the number at the bottom is this side, so the number on this side of this number should be the one on the bottom also. You need to keep the pattern. What do I mean? You could also do it like this. You could also do 9 over y, so 9 over y equals, so you need to follow the same thing. You start with this, with its corresponding side, and if you notice, it's always 9 times 24, 9 times 24, y times 33, y times 33. See, as long as you follow pattern, it gives you the same answer. This is a note. So follow the pattern and then cross multiply. I'm gonna put it here, cross multiply after you set it up. So 9 times 24 here, and then 33 times y, and then solve for y, and I end up with that. Since they're dealing with feet, maybe you want to change it into a decimal form. That way it makes more sense to you. The measurement would be 6.55 feet. That's the length of the missing side for this triangle. And we are able to do that because they're similar figures. Proportions, you can use proportions when they're similar figures. It's called proportions. Okay, that one is just finding the quotients. So this is like doing the GCF almost, except this is not GCF, it's just given to you. On the other one, we need to find this. And this one is just given to you. So all you have to do is divide each separate term by that. And then simplify like that vertically. 21 divided by 7 would be 3. 4 and 2, remember you subtract. 4 minus 2, and that gives us 2. 14 divided by 7 gives us 2. And then 2 minus 2 is 0. So that is stuff not cancel, becomes 0. So you end up with 2. Not a 0, it becomes a 1. 0, 0, sorry. So that would be the quotient. This is like the fancy, if you don't have to pay attention, this is like when you divide the old way, we divide like that, long division. You end up with the same quotient, but just this side. Okay, the last one. The last one, they give you these measurements of this rectangle, and they want you to find their perimeter. Well, no, they want you to find the area. So it has multiple steps. Since we don't have what they measure, remember area would be length times width, but we're not sure what length is, we're not sure what width is. All they're giving us is a perimeter, which doesn't really directly relate to area. It kind of helps you find the sides, the lengths of the sides, but it doesn't really help you find the area. You need to find the lengths of the side to find the area first. So it helps you by finding the lengths of the side. So that's what you're gonna do first. Perimeter, you're gonna solve for m, which is this m. So how do you find perimeter? You add all the sides. So this side is equal to that, so that's the side here would be the same thing as this. This side would be the same thing as this. That's why I have it twice. 3m plus 2, 3m plus 2 because there's two of them, n minus 5 plus n minus 5 on this side because they're the same thing. And they're given to you that this should measure 74 centimeters. Okay, so now you need to solve for that equation, solve for m. So put it all together. They're all positive, so nothing really affects, doesn't affect these things inside the parentheses. So okay, combine like terms. I group them into like terms. I put all the m's on this side, and I put all the numbers on that side. This side gives me 8m, this side gives me -6, and it's equal to 74. And you keep solving for m until you get to that point where you divide, so m equals 10. So we found m. That doesn't mean we found the length, we just found m, which is part of the length. So now you substitute that 10 into that m, like I did here. So we're gonna find the length and the width using the m that we found here. So you substitute into those m's, and then the length, it gets the 32 centimeters, and then you substitute into the width. So the m is here, so 10 minus 5, that will give us 5. So now we have the length of this and length. Now we can find the area. So on the third step would be find the area, which is length times width, which is 32 times 5, which gives us 160. And that's it, guys. Hopefully you guys do well. Thank you.